Things that I want to do to get started. First of all, I want you to enjoy the moment, okay? And at a certain point, in just a few minutes, we're actually going to give you some paper, okay? And there's some, as an outline, there's some blanks, but we're going to let you follow along with that, okay? And so we're going to hand those out in just a minute. And there are pens on the table. As he said, 3 weeks ago, actually, I retired. And so I have to get rid of these pens. So take one with you. I've used them for the last 4 or 5 years, actually, as a business card because people like a good pen. They don't know what to do with a business card. It has my name and number on it. And then they can text me or call me if I can help them. So that's kind of my thing. A couple of things I want to say this morning. The first thing that I want to say is everything that I say and lean on to is comes from the Bible. And so I've read a lot of books. Literally have thousands of books that I own over the years, and I've read a lot of books from different authors and different things, but when it comes down to it, I going to hold to what I can find in the Bible. And to a lot of people, the Bible is something that's foreign to them. And so when they pick up a Bible and they look at it, it's just blank pages. Okay, they don't see anything. And then maybe at some point you've picked up a Bible and you've read your Bible, and there was a time and it went from being blank pages to being pages with some pictures in it, you know. But ultimately our goal as believers and as disciples is to have a Bible that when we look at it is in color. Okay? It means something to you. All right? So that's the first thing I want to leave with you today is think about the Bible. Second thing, I want you to understand everybody in this room is different. And man, that's a great thing. And we're not trying to make robots. We're not trying to line everybody up and let them talk the same and act the same and everything. God has gifted each person, and you've got to follow those gifts and find your place in God's plan for you. And so that's important. There was a young man who was actually unemployed and lived in a small town and was looking for a job. And so he heard that they were hiring down at the First Baptist Church there in town. So he went down and walked in the office and said, I understand you're hiring. You need a custodian, a janitor. And she said, yeah, we are, but you'll have to talk to the pastor. So he went in and met with the pastor, and they talked for a while. And the pastor really liked this young man. And so he said, I tell you what, to get you started, we're going to have you fill out some forms to get everything that they'll need. And so the man was honest, and he said, Pastor, I'm going to be honest with you right front. My handwriting is atrocious, and I don't even read that good. And so I just might need some help filling out those forms. And the pastor said, listen, part of this job is ordering things and writing up stuff and all that. And so you're going to get frustrated with this, and then we're frustrated with you. So I tell you what, maybe this isn't the job for you. But listen, it's almost lunchtime. And so the pastor reached in his own pocket and gave the guy some money and said, listen, go down to the diner, eat lunch on me, and keep the change. And God's going to provide for you. So the young man, a little disappointed, but he was excited because he was about to get a free lunch. So he went down to the diner, he had lunch, had change in his pocket. He's walking back down the street, decided to stop at the little grocery store, buy some fruit. So he's got some fruit, and he's standing on the corner waiting to cross, and a guy pulls up in a pickup truck, lowers his window, and says, hey, how much for the fruit? And the guy knew how much he had paid for it, so he added a little bit on, and the guy said, okay. So he sold it to that guy right there on the street corner. And so he thought to himself, hey, I think I could do that. So he comes back the next day with more fruit, and he's selling fruit off that street corner to the point where now he's got to have fruit delivered, so he's looking a storefront. All this time, he's making money, and he's putting all his money in shoe boxes. I mean, literal cash. And one of his friends says, man, you need to put that money in the bank. And the guy says, I don't know anything about banks. He said, well, go down to the bank. They'll help you. Just tell them you got money. So he goes down to the bank. He walks in. He doesn't know who to ask for. So he says, can I speak to the president of the bank? And the lady said, well, why do you want to talk to the president? Well, I'm going to open an account, and I didn't know who to ask for. And she said, well, he's available. You can talk to him. So they went in the office, and they talked, and he explained to him how he had money and everything. And so the bank president says, okay, I tell you what, we're going to get started. Here's some forms, and we got to fill these out. And so the young man went through the same speech he did with the pastor and explained his handwriting was terrible. He couldn't read very good, and he would need some help. And so then the bank president said, so, by the way, how much money do you have? He says, well, last time I counted, I had about $300,000. He says, now, young man, let me get this straight. You're telling me you started a business from scratch. You have made $300,000 profit, and you can't read and write? He said, young man, you know where you'd be if you could read and write? He said, yes, sir. I'd be the janitor down at the First Baptist Church. Now, guys, there's a guy that knew who he was, okay? You got to know who you are, all right? And that's the ultimate goal today, is to know who you are. And so right in the middle of the longest sermon recorded in the Bible by Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, right in the middle, Jesus makes this statement to the disciples and all those that were listening. Matthew 6, verse 33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you. That's our ultimate goal, is to seek first the kingdom of God. So this is where I need to get those handouts back there. They're there, and you're going to hand those out, and we're going to talk just a little bit about commitment and how important it is to this. And so we're going to go through the first part, and as you can see on the screen, you know, it's our commitment, and we're going to go through three things. There'll be three sections today, and what we're going to do is we'll have a section, and I'll talk a little bit, and then you guys will talk at your table for a few minutes. We'll take a break, use the bathroom, get something else to drink or whatever, and if we put those three sections up on the screen that we're going to look at, and the first one is our commitment to God. The second one is our commitment to our family, and the third, our commitment to our church. And I was very careful not to say your commitment, okay, because we're in this together. This is our commitment. I mean, this is all new material that I developed, and this has put me under some heavy conviction of, hey, am I doing this? I'm about to stand up there and tell these guys, you know. So it was very easy it would have been very easy to say your commitment, but I don't want to do that, because I want you to see this as a group. I want you to see this as everybody needs to do this, okay? And so we're going to go through the first topic, but I do want to just say something about commitment. So this is a 101st Airborne hat, okay? And I live in St. Augustine, and this was a hat that was given to me by a guy in the 101st Airborne. And so I walk every morning in my neighborhood, and a guy stopped me a couple of weeks ago and began to talk to me about military stuff. He told me he was in the Army Rangers, and we began to talk, and I said, listen, before we get too far down this road, you need to know that someone gave me this hat, okay? I didn't earn it. I wasn't in the 101st Airborne. I wasn't a screaming eagle. I've never jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. All right. But I like the hat. So he laughed. And I said, I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I've almost quit wearing it, even though it was a gift, because I have been told more than once when I've got this hat on, thank you for your service. And now my dad was an Air Force pilot, so I grew up around the military. I don't know if there's military people here in the room, but I love the military. But I don't want to pretend to be something that I'm not, okay? Now, one of my sons is in law enforcement and was in the military and stuff, and so this is a backpack that he gave me, and I told him, I said, I love this backpack. I just am careful where I take it, all right? Because I don't want to give the impression, I don't want to fake it, all right? I don't want to look like I am somebody that I'm not, okay? And it's very easy in the Christian men's world to pretend. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid pretending that we are something. You know, that whole idea of the chicken and the pig are walking down the road, and they see this big sign that says, free breakfast, donations welcome. And so the chicken says, man, we should stop and make a donation. And the pig said, yeah, to you, it's a donation. To me, it's a commitment. All right? Because you can just drop an egg off. I can't. And so you and I need to understand is the commitment that we make is not just a contribution, just something we do for a few hours. But the most important thing is what you do when you're not here. You see, it's very easy sitting at this table to be and appear to be part of the whole program, and no one knows. Okay? It's very easy. On Sunday, tomorrow morning, it'll be very easy to sit in church. Very easy. And not know. No one would know because you can just sit with everybody else. But I want you to understand that we need to go all in, okay? And there was a story that goes way back to the 1500s when Cortez came from Spain and landed in Mexico. And one of the things, he wanted his guys to be committed. And so what did he do? He burned the ships, okay? And, 4 months later, they had defeated the Aztecs, okay? A great civilization because they were committed. Not because there were more of them. In fact, there were a lot less. But it's because they were committed and they burned the ships. And so, the lion doesn't just hope that the gazelle will faint out of fright. He actually has to chase him, okay? And so today we want to develop something that gives you kind of a plan. I always say I'm going to put this on a t-shirt and make money off of it. But anyway, so here's what I like to say, okay? Hope is a great attitude, but it's a terrible strategy. You can't just hope things happen, okay? You had to figure out how you were going to get here this morning. You couldn't just go and sit in the car and just hope that it takes you there. You had to have a plan. You had to know which way you were going. And maybe there's more than one way to get here from your house. Okay? I actually had to get off the interstate 2 times. Of course, I'm driving. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving thinking, oh, this will be breeze coming down the interstate. There were 2 bad wrecks. I had to get off twice and do a detour. Okay? But I had to have some plan to make it here. I couldn't just hope that I made it. I couldn't say, well, those guys will understand. I had good intentions. We want to be more than good intentions. We want to be committed, okay? We want to be committed. And we need to live and breathe our commitment. We need to ask ourselves how bad we want it and fully commit to doing this, all right? Now, We often commit to what we love, but the love of God is his commitment to us. By the way, it's based on who he is, not who you are. Okay? Everybody that loves you because of something. Because you're their dad, or because you're their brother, or because you're their cousin, or you're their uncle. Everybody who loves you for a reason. Okay? Because of that. But God doesn't love you because you're somebody. He loves you because of who he is. And so we need to keep that in mind, that this commitment that we're making back to God is he's already made a commitment to us. Okay? He's already made a commitment. And God doesn't love you because you matter. You matter because God loves you. Okay? There's a difference. So let's look at our commitment to God. Okay, so, all right. Here we go. All right. So, the first thing we're going to look at is when grace comes to town. We're going to talk about our commitment to God. And we're going to look at a guy that is in the Bible, and when grace came and how it changed his life. And then we're going to look at the promise that same grace you can have. And then we want to end with the people. And that's all of us and how we can be the people of grace. Okay, so you will also learn that I was the guy who loved show and tell. Okay? All right, so it was in 1998, and there were two families that had gone to the beach, and it's Florida. What happens in the afternoon in the summer in Florida? It rains, oftentimes lightning, and so there were two families, and they were about. One of them was about where this chair is, and one of them was about where that table was, and they didn't know each other. And so they were getting ready to decide, because they saw a storm coming. The storms in the afternoon, doesn't come from the ocean. It comes back over the Everglades and moves its way in. You guys know this if you live in Florida, and obviously you do. And so they were deciding what to do, and the family over there the guy was trying to fold up an umbrella, and this family here was trying to gather up their chairs, and then there was a pop. A bright light flashed, and the guy standing right over there was folding up his umbrella, and a lightning bolt came down, hit that umbrella, passed through this man into the ground and dug a ditch all the way over to this chair, which sat like that. And this guy, his wife, had just got out of the chair, and he had just reached to grab it, to fold it, when the lightning bolt went in his hand and out his back. And there was sand flying, people screaming and everything, and a young lifeguard, 17 years old, who had been trained in CPR, but if you've ever been trained in CPR, you don't really do it. You do it on a dummy, okay? And he was about to do it for the first time in his life, and he came running and got to this guy first, and he started doing CPR. This guy's wife had the presence of mind to say, I think my husband's breathing, but that guy over there is turning blue. And so that young man went over there and began to do CPR on that guy right over there. They came and took them both to the hospital, and the guy over there lived about 12 hours, and he died. And he left behind two young daughters and a wife. And this guy over here had three young sons. And but the doctor came in, and this was, and he said, I've actually been doing this a long time. I've been a doctor in Florida. I've done a lot of lightning victims. And in fact, he said, you're number 25. And he said, but I want you to know I've only talked to 8 of them because the others didn't make it. And so he said, you're still here, and we're going to keep you for a little while because we're not sure, what happened, if anything happened. His blood pressure was up and stuff. So anyway, that night that guy was in the hospital room, and this orderly came in, and he kind of snuck around and came up and said, hey, the word on the street is there were 2 guys struck. One guy died, one guy didn't. You're the lucky one. So I need you to pick my lotto numbers. And the guy said, no, I'm not lucky. I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Grace, he said, I'm only here by the grace of God. That could have been me. That could have been me. So I tell you that story to tell you that the guy that over there was named Bill. The guy that was here is me. I'm that guy. Okay? I'm that guy. And by the grace of God, I'm here. That was 24 years ago on July 25th. And it was a day that I'll always remember because that was to me when Grace came to town. And Grace, God gave me a whole nother chance. And so let's look at, if we could, the first thing is the picture of Grace for your blanks. If you're a blank person, I will do my best to make it. I've tried to make it simple, and we're going to look at a story in the Old Testament. And let me just say this: if you don't remember anything else I say today, I want you to remember this about Bible characters. Okay, there's 2 things that are universally true about every Bible character. I don't care who it is. Okay, I don't care who it is. These 2 things are true. All right. So next time you read a story and there's a Bible character in it, think of these 2 things. Number 1. Okay, ready? Bible characters did not know they were Bible characters. Okay? No one ever told them. They didn't get out of bed thinking, I wonder if they're going to talk about me in Sunday school this week. Okay? No, they didn't know they were Bible characters. All right? So that's the first thing. So we're going to look at a Bible character who didn't know he was a Bible character. He was a person just like you and me. All right? He just got out of bed and God decided to include his story in it. And the second thing is true of all Bible characters. Not only did they not know they were Bible characters, when we read their story, they are right in the middle of their story. In other words, they didn't know how the story ended. We do because we've read the story. And so we're a lot more like Bible characters than we think because, see, we're still in our story. Just like Daniel had never seen anybody come out of the lion's den, David had never seen anybody kill a giant. He didn't know what was going to happen. We do because we've read the story. But you need to remember, when we're reading a story about a Bible character, they're in the middle of their story, just like you still are. So, tucked back in the Old Testament, in the book of 2 Kings, there's a story of a guy. And we're going to look first of all at 2 Kings 9 first, and then we'll refer to, but I need to read this so you understand the story and understand I said 2 Kings. I'm sorry. I'm saying, why isn't it there? 2 Samuel. I'm sorry. 2 Samuel chapter 9. I thought, why is that not there? Okay. All right. So here's what starts in chapter 9, verse 1. This is King David. He's just become king. And he says, in verse 1, is there any remaining from the family of Saul I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake? Now, Saul was the previous king who had died. Jonathan was one of his sons who had just died. And there was a servant of Saul's family named Ziba. They summoned him to David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? I am your servant, he replied. So the king said, is there anyone left in Saul's family that I can show the kindness of God to? Ziba said to the king, there is still Jonathan's son who was injured in both feet. The king asked him, where is he? Ziba answered, "You'll find him in Lo-debar at the house of Micah, son of Amiel." So King David had him brought into the house of from the house of Micah, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar. Verse 6. Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David, fell face down, and paid homage to David. David said, "Mephibosheth." And he replied, "I am your servant." Verse 7, "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "since I intend to show kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore all your grandfather Saul's field, and you will always eat meals at my table." Mephibosheth paid homage to him, and he said, "What is your servant that you take an interest in a dead dog like me?" He goes on to say, "Then the king summoned Saul's attendant and said to him, I have given your master's grandson all that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to work the ground for him and to bring in the crops, so your master's grandson will have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do all you've commanded me." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, just like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all those living in Ziba's house were Mephibosheth's servants. However, Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. His feet had been injured. Okay, so back in chapter 4, what happened was the lady that was watching a 5-year-old boy was running to protect him because the city was being overran, and she fell on his feet, and he was crippled in both feet. Now this was a long time ago. There was no such thing as handicap parking. There was no such thing as wheelchairs. Okay? This guy grew up from 5 years old being unable to walk. All right? So he's got a lot going against him. Okay? So this 5-year-old, he grew up, his father was killed, his grandfather was killed, but now he kind of has to live in hiding. And the problem is that he's crippled and no one to protect him. But it's interesting that, first of all, when Grace comes to town, the picture in this thing is, first of all, the provision of God. Okay? The king says, "Hey, I want to help." And so God says to you, when it comes to Grace, "Listen, I have the resources. I can help you. I don't know what's going on in your world right now. I don't. But God does. And God has the provision to help you. Just like he was about to help this young man, he can help you." Okay? He can help you. And so, but the problem was, of course, he was lame. In fact, when the guy that David said, "Is there anybody?" he didn't even use his name. He used his, he's the one with the injured feet. That's all that guy had ever heard anybody say. "Oh, you're the guy with that can't walk." But when David saw him for the first time, David used his name. David used his name. And this whole thing, the interest of God in him, the interest of God is, listen, I want to tell you, I met a bunch of people in here, and everybody gave me their name, okay? I could probably give 3 of you your names this morning, okay? But I can tell you this, God knows your name. He knows everything about you. And you may have one of the coolest names in the world, or you may have a name, you may like me, my middle name, when I was growing up, I didn't even tell anybody I had a middle name because that was a weird middle name. Still is weird in my view. But the point is, God knows your name. He knows everything about you. Oh, you want to know what it is? Okay. My middle name is Irvin, but it's spelled with an E. It's Ervin. Okay. I was named after my great-grandfather, who I never met, but I have a picture of him. Okay. And my mom just liked the name. And so I just wish I'd have had a cooler name growing up. I've spent my whole life spelling even Craig to people because it sounds like Greg, and I usually don't correct them. Whatever works for you, you can call me. And then my last name, I always spell it because it's an unusual name. And I just didn't want to spend my whole life spelling all three names. I just wish, I met a guy once, and his middle name was J, just the letter J, not J-A-Y, just the letter. I said, now that's cool. I'd love to have that, I mean, it could have been E. I would have taken that, but no, they had to put a word with it. But anyway, so, and he even says, David said to him, now, you know history, and normally when a king takes over, what does he do to the previous king's family when he's a different family? He kills them, right? He kills them. And so Mephibosheth thought, well, my time's up, because my grandfather tried to kill this guy. And so now he's going to kill me. And David said, no. He said, don't be afraid. I intend to show you kindness. I intend to show you kindness. 248 times that word is mentioned in the Old Testament. 248. It's the word hesed. And it's often translated mercy. It can be translated compassion. It can be translated kindness. It's a reflection of someone's heart towards someone else. And God is interested in you. Just like David said, listen, I have interest in you. I've taken interest in you. And the New Testament says one of the fruits of the Spirit is our kindness that God wants us to show to other people. And then he says in Ephesians 4:32, be kind one to another, forgiving one another as God forgiven you. And so this kindness that God gives when grace comes, and so we should understand that no matter what we've done, no matter where we're from, and when you meet somebody in Florida, it's easy to ask the question, where are you from? Because you just assume they're from somewhere else, okay? Every once in a while, you'll meet somebody who's from here, but it's rare. And so it's a great way to introduce yourself to somebody. I had a friend of mine who was a pastor down in Stewart and moved up to just outside of Macon, Georgia, where it was totally different. And so I asked him, I said, how's it going? He said, well, you know how in Florida you say to people when you want to introduce somebody new, you say, hey, so where are you from? People up here, they don't get that question. I ask somebody where they're from, and they tell me where they just came from. They say, the post office or Walmart. And they said, no, where are you from? He said, what do you mean where I'm from? I'm from here. This is the only place I've ever lived. Okay? But it doesn't matter where we're from. God has interest in you. And that whole idea of grace is not only that he knows your name, he knows where you're from. He knows everything about you, and he still loves you. And it's not just a one-time thing. Twice in this passage, it says, but Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, is always to eat at my table. And then the last verse there, 13. However, Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. Every time that guy sat down at the table and dragged those lame feet underneath the king's table, he was reminded of the grace of God. And guys, every time, everything that we have is the grace of God. Just the very breath we have. 2 weeks ago, one of my son's father-in-law had a heart attack, 56 years old, had a heart attack and died at my son's house. And my son did CPR. The guy didn't make it. And I tell you, it had nothing to do with the guy's health, by the way. Okay, he was the guy that never ate the cheeseburger. When we went out to eat, he always, ate the salad. But hey, listen, he's in heaven this morning. Okay, we just don't know. We just don't know how long we have. But as long as we are here, God is interested in us. The last thing that mentions in here about this is that grace is consistent. The Bible is full of pictures of the consistency as God. And as consistent as you want to be, you're not always consistent. But God is. The Bible tells us in Hebrews that he is the same. He was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He never changed. We change, but he doesn't. And that's why David says the word always, because it's always there. And that is the picture of grace. Okay? The second thing that I want to talk about is found in the New Testament, and that's the promise of our grace. The promise of our grace. In the book of Ephesians, it talks about this. But so I don't know if you've made the transition from everything being in your yard, in your garage, everything being gas to battery powered. I'm slowly switching over, okay? All right? And so this is my newest toy. This is the battery to a chainsaw. Oh, guys, chainsaw. And it really works, too. I mean, I got a bunch of woods in behind my house, and man, this thing. But listen, they're different size batteries, okay? This is a 40 volt. It's a good size battery. It's pretty heavy, you know. But the promise is that this thing will work. Okay, the salesman in the Home Depot, he was selling me, and I said, so this is only as good as your promise, right? He goes, no, we guarantee it. I said, yeah. Well, so all I'm saying is God is one that never breaks a promise. In fact, the book of Titus makes this statement, Titus chapter 1, 2. And there is something God can't do. He can't lie. He can't lie. It says God can't lie. That's exactly all. That's what it says in Titus 1:2. God can't lie. God can do a lot of things, but he can't lie. And so this promise is something that he's going to keep. Now, let me tell you this, okay? When you were a little kid, you learned how to tie your shoe. Someone taught you. Someone taught you how to use a fork. Someone taught you how to ride a bike. But do you know one thing that we do a lot of? I hope you don't do a lot of it, but that we do, that no one ever taught you? And that's how to lie. No one ever taught you how to lie. Yeah, and no one ever sat you down and said, listen, here's what you do. When I ask you the question, you say no. No matter what the question is, you say no. No one ever did that. We just learned. In fact, the only difference in us and little kids is we're just better at it. You know, they're not good liars. They got chocolate on their face, and you can ask them, did you eat that candy? No. I mean, you're looking at the chocolate. They're just not very good. But so it's not based on our ability to promise something and tell the truth. It's based on God's. And that's why it says in Ephesians 2:8 and 9, it says this. For you are saved by grace through faith. It's not of yourselves, it is God's gift, not of works, so that no one can boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time for us to do. So, this whole thing is based, first of all, on the greatness of God. We're saved by faith, our faith in what God can do. Okay? We all have faith in something. Your faith, it says we are saved, we are rescued, okay, by faith in what we believe. All right? And we believe about who? About what? About what God can do. That's what we're counting on. Okay? That's what we're counting on. See, it's not based on all the stuff that you may have done. You know, the only thing, we just came through Easter. Remember the story of Easter? How many guys were there on a cross? 3. Okay? And Jesus said to one of them, hey, you're going with me. So that guy gets to heaven, and they say, well, why should we let you in? You know, he only has one answer. The guy in the middle said I could get in. That's the only answer. That's the only answer anybody has. You can't tell me how much you did, how much you gave, how many times you went to church, how much money you put in the offering, how many times you were here for church work day. None of that matters. What matters is the guy in the middle. The guy in the middle. And that's our faith. And that's what that guy had. That's all he had. He didn't have a chance to come down off that cross and go help somebody or even go to church. Sing a song. He didn't have a chance. Okay? The guy in the middle told me I could. Secondly, it's the goodness of God. Not only the greatness of God in this thing, but the goodness of God. See, that faith gives us a path on how to get there. All right? And that is goodness. You know, I'm really thankful. I actually have 3 of them on my phone, the GPSs. Okay? And when one of them started trying to get me off this morning because, as I found out later, there was a bad wreck on 95, I thought, okay, what's this? So then I cued in the second one. I got the same response. Okay? So I felt a little better. I didn't do the third one, but I do have 3 because I've been fooled before. Okay? I've been fooled before by a GPS. It's taken me to somewhere that, no, that's not the place I want to go. All right? But our faith is taking us to a place that God says, listen, it's a good thing. You can trust me. You can trust me. And so I live in the city of St. Augustine, and I get asked all the time, okay, where's a good place to eat? Where's a good place to park your car? That's the biggest challenge, okay? Because that city has been there 450-something years, and they didn't have cars back when they laid that city out. And so now finding a parking place is like, you know, a car becomes a liability because you don't know what to do with it. And and that's why not only that greatness that God can offer, that goodness, because He is giving it to you, but it's that gift of God, okay? Romans 6:23 says this, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. So God loves gifts, and that's why that John 3:16, the most famous verse in the whole Bible, who was a conversation between Jesus and maybe the most religious person he ever had a one-on-one conversation with. Okay? And he ends that conversation with John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave, that whosoever should believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Nicodemus was a religious man. Now I want to tell you this, okay? There's not a guy in here that's not religious about something. And maybe you're religious about fishing. Maybe it's you're religious about cars, working on cars. Maybe you're religious about golf, whatever. But religious simply means you're devoted to something. Okay? And Nicodemus was devoted because in order to be in his position as a Jewish man, he had to not just know the Old Testament, he had to have huge portions of it memorized. But Jesus said, wait a minute. This is going to be a different conversation because this isn't about religion. This is about a relationship. And I want you to know, for God so loved the world that He gave. And that's the thing, guys. I'm not going to make an assumption that everybody in this room has accepted that gift personally. I was 19 years old when someone asked me for the first time that I can remember, are you a Christian? And I go, of course I am. Man, this is America. I believe in God, and why wouldn't, you know? He goes, no. And he took me to the story of John 3, of a religious man. And at 19 years old, in a college dormitory, this guy, by the way, had only been saved 4 months. He had only been a believer 4 months. I was the first guy he ever witnessed to. He was terrified, thinking I was going to ask him questions. I said, dude, I know who the 7 dwarfs are, but I don't know anything about the Bible. I couldn't even ask you questions. So you just need to know, every year on January 9th, I call this guy and thank him. Every year. But it's the grace of God. But I had to accept it. I had to do it. I couldn't just talk about it. And so, guys, I don't want to just talk about it. And if you're not 100% sure, don't leave here today without knowing. don't leave here. That'll be the best thing you've ever done in your life. You'll never regret it. But if you can't make a commitment to God until you've made a commitment in your heart. Because otherwise you're just religious. You might be here every Sunday. But if you don't have that relationship, so I don't make an assumption everyone in this room does. I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. I just don't want you to leave here. All right? Yesterday I had breakfast with my new next door neighbor. And he admitted to me, yeah, I'm religious. I was raised a Lutheran. And I said, do you have a relationship? And he said, probably not. But I go to church. I go, that's good. That's a good start. But you got to have a relationship. So I'm praying for Rich. I told him, I said, man, I love to tell people my next door neighbor's rich. He goes, yeah, I've used that line before. And I go, yeah, well, it works for me. All right, so let's go to the last part of this and talk about the people of grace. Okay? The people of grace. Now, everybody in this room is different. We got some old people. We got young people. We got different things. Okay? So, I got two hammers. This one is about 82 years old, if I figured right. Got it from my grandfather. Okay? This one right here, I got at Christmas. All right? They both basically work the same. Okay? They're different. One's new, one's old. But, it didn't come with any instructions. All right? We just know how to use a hammer. Okay? And so, when God looks at you, he sees a purpose. He sees a reason why you're here. And he wants to make you part of his family, and he wants you to tell other people about Jesus. That's why you're still here. That's the reason the moment you got saved, if you are saved, you didn't go straight to heaven, it's because God left you here to do something. And just like these hammers, I don't care if they're 82 years difference in their age. They both still work. Okay? So it doesn't matter which one I pick up. They both still work. All right? And someone gave me this as a gift. I didn't need one. This one has worked fine, okay? But you and I have got to understand, if we're going to be the people of grace, we've got to understand, and that's why Paul would write in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 10, he would write this. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. So in other words, he said, I worked, but the only reason why I'm here is because of grace. Okay? And so he starts out by saying, I am what I am. And guys, you are what you are but by the grace of God. And, it's like the story of, as I said earlier, it came down to, they tried to let Jesus go, remember? They gave an option, and some guy named Barabbas got let go. There's all sorts of stories of whatever happened to him. We don't know really whatever happened to him, but you're talking about a guy that got a second chance. I mean, there was an innocent guy died for a guy who was guilty. That's you and me. We're as guilty as Barabbas. And we're that people of grace. I want to say this as we conclude this section, okay? So if we could go to the next slide, just as a review of the three things that I've said, okay? I've said there's a picture. We got the story from the Old Testament, from a guy named Mephibosheth. That was the picture. And it was of somebody who deserved maybe not even to be there. He was crippled. He was handicapped. He had everything going against him. But the king promoted him to the same level as his sons. That's you and me. We got promoted. We don't deserve it, but we got it. All right? And then that promise. And he gave us a promise. For by grace are you saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is a gift of God. It's a gift. That's the promise. And lastly, the people. We need to be the people of God. We need to be like those hammers. We have a purpose. So, let me end with telling you part 2 of this lightning story, because it has a second part. Okay? All right? So, about a year later, I was in Tallahassee, and there was a pastors' conference going on. So there was a bunch of pastors from all over Florida in town, and I went to a restaurant with 2 of them. And we walked in this restaurant, and there was a big table in the back, kind of like this table back here with all these people. And there was mostly pastors, but there were a few wives, I guess, sitting there. And so they waved us over, and we sat with them. And so one of the guys with me says, "Hey, tell them your lightning story. That's a cool story. Tell them." I said, No, they don't want to hear that. No, it's a cool story. This was almost exactly 1 year. And so I just began to tell the story. And the lady that was sitting right across from me, I could see a tear start to run down her face. So I stopped. And I said, "Guys, I have no idea what this lady's story is, but obviously hers doesn't have a good ending. And I'm just going to stop because I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. I don't know if there was someone in her family who had been struck and died." And I said, I don't want to make... She goes, no, you tell your story, and then I'll tell mine. I go, okay. So I told the story, just like I told you. I didn't have the chair, by the way. This was the actual chair. It took a beating that day, but this was the actual chair. And so then she decided to tell her story. So she says, "I'm a pastor's wife, but I'm also a middle school principal in Tallahassee." And she said, last year, I had 2 girls, one in 6th grade, one in 8th grade, who were sisters, who sat in my office more than once and cried about their dad. His dad died. And they asked me a question I never could answer. And she said, "I can answer that question now." And she said, here was their question. "Why did my dad die and the other guy live?" And she said, "Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would meet the other guy. I was the other guy in that story, because that guy who died over here was from Tallahassee." Again, the grace of God. When the grace of God comes to town, it changes lives. And it changes yours, it changes your family, it changes everybody. Okay? God put us on this earth. We're men, and we're going to make a commitment. The first thing we're going to commit to is we're going to commit to God. Okay? So here's what I want you to do now. We're going to take about 3 or 4 minutes, not long. I want you to look on the back sections of that handout. There's a couple of questions related to this session. Okay? And we're just going to talk at the table. We're not going to talk long. You're not going to write down answers. And the questions are not real complicated. There's 3 of them. We may not even get to past the first one. What did you just hear? What does this mean for you? And how are you challenged? You can answer them all at once. You can answer one of them. But I want you guys at the table to take just a minute. And then we're going to take a break, and you can get something to eat, something to drink, use the bathroom, and then we'll come back for session 2. All right, so this isn't going to be long. If this was a room full of women, I'd have to give you 30 minutes. Because you would talk about everything you felt. I don't care about how you felt about it. Okay? I just want to know, was there anything, what did you just hear? Okay? And let's just take a minute and talk, all right? Just at your table. All right?